Okay, everybody, welcome to your first flip lesson, which is going to cover geometric topics. We are going to today cover angles and a little bit with lines. Your learning target is you, the student, will identify and classify basic geometric terms about angles. In our first slide right here, what we have are the basic groups of angles. Here, we're going to classify angles into their correct classification. So you got right angles right here. Right angles equal exactly 90 degrees. They don't equal 90.1, they don't equal 89.9, they're exactly 90 degrees. They're usually denoted with a square in the corner. Acute angles are less than 90 degrees. So they're less than 90 degrees, so all these angles here are all smaller than 90 degrees. Obtuse angles are kind of the opposite of acute angles. Obtuse angles are greater than 90 degrees. Okay, so all these angles right here are greater. So I'm betting like this angle right here, I'm just off the top of my head, betting that like 160 degrees. This one right here might be 155 degrees, but they're all greater than 90. They're also less than 180. And then lastly, you have your straight angles. So your straight angles equal exactly 180 degrees. Now, one thing that might be new to you are supplementary angles, and I'm going to go ahead and just read this to you. But supplementary angles are two angles where their sum, the sum of their measures, is 180 degrees exactly. So usually you're going to find straight angles or supplementary angles on a line. You can call that a linear pair. Linear means a line, and pair, of course, that means two. So those both together, this angle plus this angle, equals 180 degrees exactly. Right here, we have a linear pair. 20 and 160 makes 180. So those are called supplementary. Supplementary angles equal 180 degrees. So right here what we have are, two angles, and are they together supplementary? And you just look at the angle measurement here, 78 plus 102 degrees does indeed equal 180 degrees. So there you have it. Now we just covered supplementary angles. Complementary angles are two angles that have a sum of 90 degrees. So together they make a right angle. Each angle is the complement of each other. So right here, the complement of 30 would be 60 degrees. The complement of 60 would likewise be 30. The complement of 50 degrees is 40, because 50 and 40 makes 90. The complement of 2 degrees would be 88 degrees, because 2 plus 88 equals 90. And that's all there is to it. So complementary angles together make a right angle. They make 90 degrees exactly. Now another thing that might be new to you are these things called vertical angles. Now vertical angles have nothing to do with the word vertical. Some of you might understand what the word vertical means. Vertical usually means up and down. Vertical angles have nothing to do with just being up and down. Vertical angles have more to do with the vertex. The vertex of an angle is where the angles start, where the lines cross. That's called the vertex. More than one vertex is called a vertice, so you could call them vertices. But vertical angles are directly opposite of each other, and vertical angles are equal. This is very important to know, that vertical angles equal exactly the same thing. So angle 1 is directly opposite of angle 3, and they share that vertex. Same is true with angle 2. Angle 2 is directly opposite of angle 4. So those would be called vertical. Also, if you know their measurement, for instance, angle 2, if you know that angle 2 is 140 degrees, angle 4 is also 140 degrees. So there's enough information there to figure out what the other angles are. If you know that angle 3 is 40 degrees, well, so is angle 1. Vertical angles are exactly the same. They have exactly the same measure. If you were to trace it and draw it on top of it, it would be exactly the same measure. Adjacent angles are angles that are basically next to each other. Right here, I have a picture of two angles. Angle 1 and angle 2 are adjacent because they share a common side, which is right here. This is called a ray. So they share that common side, and they share a vertex, and they're right next to each other. Okay, so angle 1 and angle 2, they're not equal to each other, they're just adjacent. They're right next to each other. So they share this ray right here, and that's it. They have to be next to each other. You cannot say that this angle and this angle, even though I drew them kind of next to each other, they're not vertical because they're not sharing a common ray. They're not sharing, that part of the angle, and they're actually not sharing a vertex either. They're just drawn kind of next to each other. So adjacent means really close up against each other. They're sharing a vertex, and they're sharing a ray. Next up, corresponding angles are angles that are formed by an intersecting line or lines, and they are in the same relative position. That's kind of the big part that I want you guys all to kind of make a note of here. They're in the same spot, basically. So angle A, for instance, is in the same relative position as angle E down here. Angle C is in the same relative position as angle G down here. So you'd call those corresponding. They're kind of in the same spot. Another thing that you might want to know about corresponding angles is that corresponding angles, when you are dealing with parallel lines, are equal. So in my last example, I showed you corresponding angles, but the lines, these lines right here, were not parallel. But in this instance, they are parallel. So you can get away with saying that angle A, angle B, they are corresponding and they're congruent. Congruent means equal. The symbol for congruent is one of these things. It's a similar sign, and equal. That means similar and equal. So you can say that angle A, this is a symbol for angle, angle A, F, and we call this angle C, then angle F is congruent to angle E. Now this next slide might not be any surprise to you, but parallel lines are lines that are on the same plane that never intersect. Everyone should know what parallel lines are. If you don't, write this down, but they never intersect. They don't cross. The most commonly misunderstood thing about parallel lines is that people think, oh, they're not touching, therefore they're parallel. And you have to look at their implied path as well. You can say that their implied paths are going to cross as well. So you can't just say, well, they're not touching in my picture. Well, they are going to eventually. In our next slide, we have perpendicular lines, and perpendicular lines are lines that intersect to form a right angle. So perpendicular lines, when they cross each other, when they intersect, there's a right angle that's formed. Okay, so a lot of streets come out this way, the way things are tiled. A lot of things, especially in architecture, are drawn or built with perpendicular lines. Right here, here's a picture of the way Mr. Gasson parallel parks. I think he misunderstood parallel parking to be perpendicular parking, so that was pretty bad. So make sure you talk to Mr. Gasson about the way he parks. It's called parallel parking, not perpendicular parking. Shame on him. Shame, shame. Well, that does it for our lesson here. Went over a lot of terms. Make sure you guys have all those notes down and be prepared to work with those new terms tomorrow in class the next day when we work on our target practice. Everyone have a great night. See you tomorrow.